John Swinney MSP's Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Employment and Sustainable Growth. We're delighted he's found the time to be with us here this afternoon. If I could just ask him to come up to the lectern. Ladies and gentlemen, John Swinney.
Well, good afternoon, Mark, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much for accommodating me at this late hour of the day. I was struck by France's last comment there about the fact that it would be desirable if his next contribution to a Holyrood Conference was by being beamed in by some technology. And it put me in mind of one of those moments in my ministerial life where I thought there has to be a better way of doing this than the way we are currently doing this. And it was a moment where one of my colleagues and I were meeting with the leadership of Orkney Islands Council and the leadership of Orkney Islands Health Board. So the clue is that they're all from Orkney, which requires a plane journey to Edinburgh, and we were in Edinburgh. And they wanted to see us, we wanted to see them. The meeting was to last for 45 minutes, and it was scheduled at a moment in the day where, for convenience to us in Edinburgh, it had to happen, but to their inconvenience, it required them to fly from Orkney to Edinburgh, to stay overnight in a hotel because of the times, and then fly back later on that day. So for this 45-minute meeting, 6 people from Orkney Islands Council and the Health Board had to come to Edinburgh for this particular meeting. Not a particular showdown, not something that we needed to have them in the room so that we could absolutely lay down the law, just a kind of discussion about a couple of issues they were concerned about and we wanted to make some progress about. To my utter horror, the only room in Parliament that was available to host this meeting was the video conference room. So if you could ever encapsulate a more disastrous moment, which when I looked, as I invariably do 5 minutes before any meeting happens, where's it happening? And it's in the video conference room, and I realise that these 6 people have come down from Orkney, flights, hotels, time away from the office for 45 minutes, and we're meeting in the video conference room. And if that example, in a sense, said anything to me, it was, we cannot continue to do it this way. I then was, afterwards, when I summoned up the courage to even confront this issue with the representatives of Orkney Islands Council, they said to me, oh, this very frequently happens to us because apparently all the video conference suites in St Andrew's House in Parliament are always fully booked. And I thought, that just cannot possibly be the case. I could count on the fingers of one hand the number of times I've sat in a video conference suite exercising my ministerial responsibilities where I could quite easily exercise them in dialogue with Highland and Island authorities and various other people quite conveniently. Now, I use that not to sort of chide all the arrangements that go on around about ministerial meetings, but to indicate that we really do have to utilise the opportunities and the facilities and the technologies around about us to make sure that we work in a more effective and a smarter way. And crucially, in terms of the environment in which we're now operating, all of us as public servants or as individuals who wish to work with the public sector in pursuing private sector interests in an efficient fashion that makes the maximum use of the resources available to us, because it won't be news to anybody in the room today that we face significant challenges in the availability of public expenditure. And the challenge is, how can we make that public expenditure have the maximum impact at a time when we have other pressures on us, such as the changing demographic makeup of the population, the necessity for us to be delivering better outcomes for the citizens with whom we interact, and to ensure that we do that within a public spending envelope which is under constant pressure, not just in terms of deficit reduction and all that goes with the programme which affects the block grant in Scotland, but the factors that we're wrestling with within Scotland in terms of how we take forward our public service agenda. So it's not just the example of the meeting in the video conference room with Orkney Islands Council that's focused ministers' minds on how we do this, but these other pressures of public expenditure, demographic pressure, and the imperative of improving outcomes for the citizens of Scotland, because improving outcomes lies at the very heart of what we are, well, what anybody tries to do in their work in public services. You know, I refuse to accept any view that could be peddled that people enter the public service to deliver poorer outcomes than was previously done in the past. That's just not a motivation I detect or come across within the public sector. People are coming into the public services to deliver better outcomes with more impact on the lives of individuals. So our conclusion as a government, in a number of the steps that we've taken forward, is to ensure that at the heart of that agenda, we put a much greater emphasis on the opportunities created by digital technology to create a foundation for innovative, integrated public services that inevitably can utilise resources more effectively than was previously the case. One of the other inevitabilities, and this gets to the heart of some of what else I'll come on to say to you in a moment, is that digital solutions, I think, by their nature, require organisational boundaries to be transcended. There will be very few digital applications and digital solutions in the design and delivery of public services that will neatly be encapsulated in some neat public sector structure chart. There will be an inevitability of stretching beyond the boundaries of our public services. We have recognised this in some respects in relation to the integration of adult health and social care, which requires of our public servants a significant amount of joint working between local authority staff and health board staff in a fashion that we'd all like to have seen in the past, but I don't think organisational boundaries have permitted us to see that to any discernible extent. So the digital emphasis in our approach will undoubtedly force us and drive us to cross organisational boundaries and to find solutions that will be relevant and attractive to the public sector in that context. Arising out of that, of course, also will be inevitably the opportunities for the private sector to participate and work with the public sector in designing these solutions that will disrespect organisational boundaries and that will deliver solutions that meet the needs of individuals. And I think the importance that I attach to this is that we must be constantly working with others to find new ways of working that will enable us to essentially use digital technology to have that wider impact. I'm quite struck again in Francis' presentation about the degree to which smartphone technology is being incorporated and encapsulated by much of what is going on within Amsterdam. And I'm struck by the degree to which in the private sector we all interact with the private sector using an absolutely colossal multiplicity of apps and online solutions and all that goes with it, whereas our interaction with the public sector is a much more traditionally based interaction than the private sector has put in place. So I think there's a need for us to look with renewed vigour in terms of the innovation and the inventiveness that is required to find new ways of ensuring the public sector is delivering solutions that are much more deeply embedded in the technologies and the systems that members of the public are using today. The foundation of much of the government's thinking around this question has been created by the two principal reports that we commissioned in this area, the review of public sector ICT by John McClelland and the report on public sector reform that we commissioned from the Christie Commission led by the late Campbell Christie. And those reports have given rise to essentially two significant elements of what the government has produced. First of all, the public service reform strategy, which was set out along with the budget in the autumn of 2011, which then gave rise to the the Digital Future Strategy focusing on the delivery of public services in September 2012. And essentially, the Digital Public Services Strategy is a subset, as a product of the reform agenda which the government set out in the autumn of 2011. And let me just take a few moments to talk about some of the details of all of that. The government's public sector reform agenda was constructed around 4 pillars with which many of you will be familiar. First of all, prevention, of ensuring that we more and more within the public sector look to create anticipatory interventions in the delivery of public services, so that we are trying to predict much more so what are the issues that we are likely to confront in delivering public services to individuals, rather than picking up the pieces once the disaster has happened. And I'm particularly mindful, as I look at some of the availability of big data and open source data, of the opportunities that are created for us in a digital environment to identify much more readily how we can predict who might be the individuals that will require some public service intervention in the years to come, and how can we take steps proactively and in a preventative spirit to anticipate where that demand might arise. I'm thinking particularly in relation to care services for the elderly, whereby the use of a sophisticated amount of data, we may be able to identify individuals who require our intervention long before there is a crisis moment, which then necessitates our intervention. And of course, in a crisis moment, that becomes a much more expensive form of care to deliver, and clearly a level of care that is much, much more disruptive to the individual concerned than a proactive preventative intervention. There are clearly other approaches which are implicit in the support of our youngest citizens through the early years work that is underway. So we should be thinking of how we can use technology to assist us in taking forward that preventative agenda. The second pillar of our reform agenda is around performance, where we want to be open about the need to learn challenging lessons from one part of the country to the other. I'm not interested in league tables. I'm not interested in putting up a graphic which shows local authority A at the bottom and local authority B at the top and castigate local authority A. That debate is a sterile, pathetic debate. The debate we've got to be interested in is openly talking as a public service about how we can emulate in local authority A the performance that's been delivered in local authority B, and how we can learn lessons in the transition of public services. And that strikes me as a much more meaningful and valuable utilisation of performance data than is the case in the league table model. And of course, the utilisation of technology gives us a much better ability to assess how systems are working more effectively in one area versus another. Thirdly, the third pillar of the reform agenda is the focus on people, and ensuring that we are focused on improving outcomes for our citizens, but we also see our public servants as key agents of delivering that improved performance at local level, and empowering individuals within our public services to design and to define the ways in which that can be undertaken very effectively. And the final pillar of the reform agenda is the partnership field, which essentially comes back to my whole point about disrespecting boundaries. One of the big lessons I've learnt as a minister is that absolutely nothing is sorted in a neat little compartment. You've got to bring people together to find solutions, and technology must be a huge enabler of assisting us in that process, where we can try to, the more we focus on the individual member of the public and the delivery of public services, the more we use technology to identify how we can make the most impact on those individuals, the greater can be the onus on partnership working to support us in that process. All of that is crucial for public service reform, to ensure that our public services are moving with the times, that they're focusing on delivering better outcomes for individuals, that they are delivering within the cost envelope that we have available, but they're also crucial in terms of driving economic change and economic development within our society. The more we can utilise technology to create a stronger platform for economic activity, the greater will be the impact on the lives of our citizens. And when I look around at the very exciting developments that I think are happening in terms of the availability and utilisation of big data, I can see huge opportunities for Scotland, given the now absolutely first-class level of cooperation and coordination there is between the work of our universities and colleges and the public sector and our business community as a kind of triumvirate of partners. I think there must be significant market opportunities for us to take forward this agenda in a meaningful way. I'm struck by the opportunities we have in Scotland to innovate. That's one of them, where we can work closely between the public sector, the business community and our universities in researching some of these big data applications. I think it's mirrored by the innovative work that's been taken forward by the public sector in taking forward the SWAN network, the Scottish Wide Area Network Programme, which I think is commonly viewed as an example of strategic innovation within the public sector and representing a significant opportunity for us to make a significant impact on the delivery of public services. I'm struck by the way in which the initiatives the government has taken forward on coordinated procurement, looking back to the early part of our administration around coordinated procurement around electricity and gas supplies, how that's brought in tremendous participation across the public sector, much greater than we ever anticipated would be the case. And the SWAN programme, I think, has the same characteristics about it. A really strong platform, a platform that can assist us in delivering efficient and integrated solutions within the public sector, and something which I think will be fundamentally attractive to a range of players within the public sector within Scotland. I suppose what I would like to conclude on is by an invitation, recognising the fact that this audience is a mixture of private and public sector representatives, to essentially say that the government wants to encourage a climate within Scotland where our public servants are as interested in finding the innovative and inventive ways of delivering public services and utilising new technology to enable that to be the case, as the private sector will be in pursuing the same agenda. And I hope that we can create a common sense of purpose, whilst respecting the inevitable procurement processes that have to be undertaken, to create a common space of engagement between the private and public sectors in learning some of the lessons from the private sector which enable us to use apps aplenty, enable us to use online solutions, just as a matter of course, to deploy some of that thinking and that imagination into the public service. But we will only be able to do it in the public service with an engaged population leading the public services who are interested in finding these solutions. And the finding of these solutions is absolutely fundamental, because on that basis we will be able to deliver better outcomes for the citizens of Scotland, and that's what brought all of us into the public services in Scotland. So I look forward to discussing those issues with you this afternoon. Thank you very much.